You probably know someone like this. They don't dominate conversations. They don't seem particularly interested in impressing people. And if somebody disagrees with them, they don't immediately start building a case for why they're right. They can admit they don't know something without looking embarrassed. They can watch somebody else get the attention without trying to pull it back. And strangely, they often seem more confident because of it. There are 7 habits that tend to show up in people with this kind of quiet confidence, and most of them have very little to do with looking confident. Because psychologically, some of the strongest confidence is almost invisible. And this isn't going to be a flattering checklist where matching 4 habits means you're secretly more evolved than everybody else. These are tendencies, not qualifications. But together, they reveal something important about where lasting confidence actually comes from. The first habit is that quietly confident people don't defend themselves against everything. Imagine somebody says, "I don't think that was your best work." One response is immediate. They don't understand how much work went into this. Maybe I should explain what happened. And actually, their idea wasn't that great either. Another response sounds more like, "Okay, what part didn't work for you?" The second person may not enjoy the criticism any more than the first person does. The difference is that the criticism doesn't immediately threaten their entire sense of themselves. Psychologist Michael Kernis spent years studying what he called stable and fragile self-esteem. The important difference wasn't simply whether people thought highly of themselves. It was how much that opinion changed when something went wrong. Someone can appear extremely confident, while their self-esteem depends heavily on succeeding, being admired, being right, or receiving approval. When one of those things disappears, their confidence has to be defended. Stable self-esteem doesn't need quite as much protection. Think of it like carrying a glass that is almost full to the edge. Every small bump becomes something you have to manage. When your sense of worth is steadier, you still notice the bump. You just don't experience every bump as a threat. And that leads to the second habit. Quietly confident people can say, "I don't know. This sounds almost too simple to matter." But notice what happens the next time someone asks a question in a group and nobody knows the answer. There is often a strange little dance. People guess, they qualify, they talk around the subject, anything except saying, "I don't know." Quietly confident people are usually more comfortable letting a gap remain between what they know and what they don't. They don't need competence to mean knowing everything. And that matters because a surprising amount of what we call confidence is actually reputation management. What will they think if I get this wrong? Will I still seem capable? Do I need to say something intelligent here? Once your worth isn't being decided by every interaction, you don't have to perform competence every minute. But there is another situation where this becomes much harder to fake. What happens when someone else gets the thing you wanted? Habit 3 is that quietly confident people can let someone else shine. Someone gets promoted, someone tells a brilliant story, someone walks into the room and immediately becomes the center of attention. You can be genuinely happy for them and still feel that tiny comparison happen inside you. That's human. Quiet confidence isn't the absence of comparison. It's what happens next. A secure person doesn't automatically turn somebody else's success into information about their own value. They don't need to tell a better story immediately afterward. They don't have to mention their own achievement. They don't need the spotlight returned quickly enough to reassure themselves that they still matter. And this brings us to an important distinction. Confidence and narcissism can sometimes look similar from a distance, because both can produce assertiveness and a positive self-image. But they don't necessarily run on the same fuel. Research separating narcissistic traits from healthy self-esteem has repeatedly pointed toward the importance of external admiration and how someone responds when their ego feels threatened. A person whose self-image needs constant confirmation has much more work to do when somebody else becomes the center of attention. Quiet confidence can afford to let the moment belong to somebody else. And if you're wondering where your own sense of worth tends to get its confirmation from, this is a useful place to look. The free pattern map quiz helps you identify the attachment and self-worth patterns that tend to shape reactions like these. You can find your own map at thewiredmindtv.com. The link is also in the description. Because the deeper question isn't whether you sometimes want validation. Almost everybody does. It's what happens inside you when you don't get it. Habit 4 is that quietly confident people don't need to win every disagreement. There is a particular kind of confidence that becomes visible when someone says, "I don't agree with you." For some people, disagreement feels surprisingly personal. You start explaining more. Then you find another example, then another. Eventually, you're no longer discussing the original idea. You're trying to make sure the other person leaves with the correct opinion of you. Quietly confident people can usually tolerate something that sounds simple but isn't being misunderstood. Not always, of course. There are misunderstandings worth correcting. But they don't need every person in every room to hold the version of them they would prefer. This connects to something psychologists have described as the quiet ego. Researchers Heidi Wayment and Jack Bauer use that term for a way of relating to yourself that doesn't require either shrinking yourself or constantly enlarging yourself. The self still matters. It just doesn't have to occupy the center of every interaction. And that distinction matters because quiet confidence isn't self-erasure. It isn't refusing to speak. It isn't pretending you don't care. And it certainly isn't letting people walk over you. You can be expressive, outgoing, ambitious, and even loud, and still have stable confidence. The quiet part isn't about your volume. It's about how much internal noise gets created when somebody doesn't validate you. Which brings us to habit 5. Quietly confident people make decisions they can live with. Imagine you're making an important decision. You ask 3 people what they think. One says yes, one says absolutely not. The third gives you 12 reasons why both choices could ruin your life. What happens next? People with steadier confidence can take advice seriously without handing somebody else the final vote. This connects loosely to what psychologist Julian Rotter called locus of control, which describes the extent to which we experience outcomes as being shaped by our own actions rather than only by forces outside us. This doesn't mean quietly confident people believe they control everything. Nobody does. It means they are more willing to take ownership of the part that belongs to them. They gather information. They listen. Then eventually they decide. And if the decision goes badly, they can ask, "What can I learn from this?" instead of immediately asking, "Who can tell me what I should have done?" That ability becomes especially important when there isn't a clearly correct choice. Because real confidence isn't certainty. Sometimes it's being able to move while certainty is unavailable. But even that isn't the hardest habit. The harder one appears after something has already gone wrong. Habit 6 is that quietly confident people can be wrong without becoming wrong. You made the wrong call. You misunderstood someone. You failed at something you thought you'd be good at. There are 2 things you can do with that information. You can let it describe what happened, or you can let it describe who you are. "I made a bad decision" can quietly become, "I'm terrible at making decisions. I didn't handle that conversation well," becomes, "I'm bad with people." The event becomes an identity. People with more stable self-worth are generally better able to keep those 2 things separate. They can say, "I was wrong," without hearing, "I am worthless." And strangely, that often makes them better at taking responsibility. If admitting a mistake threatens your entire identity, your mind has a very good reason to avoid admitting it. You explain. You minimize. You blame circumstances. You defend. But if your worth can survive being wrong, responsibility becomes much less dangerous. You can simply say, "I got that wrong," and then do something about it. That is one of the least glamorous forms of confidence there is. It is also one of the hardest to fake. So if confidence isn't the absence of mistakes, criticism, disagreement, or uncertainty, what actually keeps it steady through all of those things? The seventh habit gets closest to the answer. Habit 7 is that quietly confident people know how to come back to themselves. Something goes wrong. You send the message and don't get a reply. Your presentation doesn't land. Someone seems disappointed in you. You walk away from a conversation and wondering whether you said the wrong thing. There is often an immediate urge to find someone who can make the feeling go away. Tell me I didn't mess that up. Do you think they're angry? Was I wrong? Reassurance itself isn't unhealthy. Humans regulate emotions through relationships, and needing other people is not a defect. But quietly confident people tend to have another option available as well. They can soothe some of the uncertainty internally. They can sit with the possibility that somebody may be unhappy with them. They can remind themselves that one awkward conversation isn't a verdict on their character. They can wait before sending the second message. And that capacity often has roots in our earliest relationships. Attachment research suggests that repeated experiences of safety and reliable care help us build an internal expectation that distress can be survived and connection can remain intact. Over time, some of that external safety becomes internal. But early experience isn't destiny. People can develop greater security later through healthy relationships, reflection, and repeated experiences of surviving discomfort without abandoning themselves. And this is where all 7 habits begin to look less like separate personality traits. Not defending yourself against everything. Being able to say, "I don't know," letting somebody else shine. Not needing to win every disagreement. Making your own decisions. Being wrong without turning the mistake into an identity. And being able to return to yourself when reassurance isn't immediately available. They're all pointing toward the same thing. Confidence was never the noise in the room. It was the thing that didn't need the noise. Real confidence doesn't mean you stop caring what people think. It means their opinion is no longer the only place you can go to find out what you're worth. That's why some confident people don't look particularly impressive at first. They're not constantly broadcasting certainty. They're simply spending less energy defending themselves from uncertainty. If this kind of psychology helps you understand yourself, rather than simply giving you another label, subscribe to The Wired Mind now. That's what we're building here. So the next time you're in a room and you don't have the cleverest thing to say, notice what happens inside you. When somebody else gets the attention, notice what happens. When someone disagrees with you, notice what happens. When you make a mistake, notice what happens. The question isn't whether you feel anything. Quiet confidence doesn't make you immune to embarrassment, comparison, uncertainty, or the desire to be liked. The better question is whether every one of those moments gets to renegotiate your worth. Because quiet confidence isn't a performance you're missing. It's the growing ability to know who you are without requiring every room you enter to confirm it. And if the last video helped you understand why some people genuinely need more solitude, this is the other side of that conversation. Sometimes being comfortable alone and being comfortable within yourself grow from the same kind of inner steadiness. But what happens when that steadiness isn't there, and keeping people happy starts feeling necessary for keeping the relationship itself? That's where we're going next, with the psychology of people-pleasing and why saying one small word, no, can feel so much harder than it should.